Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for April 6th, the Monday after the last big Derby preps. There may be more Derby points. There will be more Derby points awarded next weekend, and we will wait to do our Derby draft show, our annual Derby draft show, until those are done. But we basically know what's going on now. So that's going to be very, very fun over the course of the next few weeks. We're going to have so much content for you, nearly daily to the Derby, I would say. We want to start this off old school. We're going to just talk about the preps in a recap show before we go any further. To do that with me, we bring in a man whose work you know from here, there, and everywhere. He's Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Going great, my friend. Glad to be here to discuss some of these big ones with you. There was a fun weekend.
How much was your phone blowing up based on some of the successful picks you gave out last week? Because I got like 6 messages telling me that Nick Tammaro is a genius. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, he already thinks he is. I can't give him this hot air to puff him up even further. But I do, in all seriousness, it was some great picking. And I do imagine you got you had some calls.
I did. I had plenty of love, which I appreciate. And obviously, I told, I think, Jackson and Chris and you that there's all these young guns out there now coming in, offering good opinions. I had to remind them that there's still some OGs out there.
One for the old guys. We'll take it. If you're an old guy, I don't even want to think about what that makes me, if we're being honest. I'm telling you. But we've been around the game a similar amount of time, so we can accept it in that regard. Did you have that try in the wood?
I did not. I actually did not bet the wood. I had done my damage for the day and was like, I'm just going to watch it. I didn't really like anything enough to bet it. I should have probably fooled around with right to party underneath, but I don't know if I would have gotten to Albus on top. And that would have been my my undoing, I think. But it did pay very well. And a friend of mine liked Albus and who was the 5? Ocelli, right. And Sean Borman liked Ocelli. He texted me Saturday morning, said he liked him, liked the late pace numbers. So a 7-5 would have been great for him, but ended up split, which the try was fine. Try paid great.
Oh, it 11-1 over 38-1 over 28-1. From a gambling point of view, this was fascinating. I think you've tipped your hand already. I was going to ask you if Albus or any of these horses from the wood are going to be relevant players come the Kentucky Derby in a few weeks' time. I will point out the buyer speed figure came back a lowly 83. It didn't look like much better form than that. We will talk about this race a little bit more in terms of some of the horses who were in here, and we should give Albus his flowers for getting the job done. But I do think that one of the headlines here is that there aren't too many headlines, if you follow.
Yeah, exactly. No, would be really surprising if any of these horses play a meaningful role in the Derby. I would highly doubt it. I'll tell you what was one of the surprises. There was few things to me that were surprising about it. Number one, multiple horses made off the pace moves in here and didn't really run into any trouble, right? The field was so gapped out from the beginning because the pace was so strong. Albus got this incredible run through on the inside, angled out, split, never had a whisker of trouble or a worry at any point in time, which, you usually think 12, 11 horses, mile and an eighth, big pace, you're going to have somebody get stuck in traffic and maybe be an interesting horse and then prompt us to bring up the whole there's no trips in slow races conversation. But there were no trips, and this was a slow race, right? So really, there were no trips. Credit to Jaime Torres, excellent ride. Credit to Riley Mott, young trainer, getting things started, and obviously having 2 Derby starters is incredible for Pin Oak stud. So I'm very very happy for him. Riley's a good guy and an up and coming trainer, so easy guy to root for, I would say. Right to Party gets Kenny McPeak back into the mix after a pretty rough spring as far as blackout times fortunes. And Ocelli, got going a little bit to get a piece of it. Napoleon Solo ran really well and looks like an excellent candidate for a cutback. I would hope Pat Day Mile is coming up sneaky tough at this point. It seems like a race year in and year out is really difficult, but you'd imagine maybe getting to a one-turn configuration would be a little bit better for him. And, other than that, Iron Honor is a horse that really underperformed and probably is a little bit better going shorter as well. When you have his bicycle type style, more ground generally isn't what you want. And he kind of proved that in here. So I don't think the result, even though it was a bit of an upset, was all that surprising. And again, I'd be very surprised if any of these horses hit the super in the Derby.
Iron Honor's one I was going to bring up just to say the contradictory thoughts of watching this race seemed like you couldn't turn back in distance fast enough. But looking at the pedigree and looking how he finished in the Gotham, you'd think the opposite. Is he maybe a horse who should get another try going a distance like a mile, or do you think they'll just regroup? What would you recommend for Iron Honor, given all the conflicting signals there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, you'd be tempted to maybe consider the Preakness and let these horses battle each other out in the Derby and see what's left. You know, if you look at last year's Preakness field, it wasn't great outside of journalism. It was a lot of horses that were, you know, graded stake types. A lot of horses that are right around where Iron Honor is right now. Maybe a couple that were a little bit better. So I would consider the Preakness. I think you probably want to give him one more try long to then decide where you want to go, because there really are no tweener races. You know, there are no miles along the way until later in the year before you're looking at a race like the Dwyer. But I think what you would do is maybe try that and see how he performs there. You know, Chad is not a guy that's going to go chase the West Virginia Derby and the Iowa Derby and races like that, but he might just be that type.
You talked about Napoleon Solo not running poorly. Does that mean that I haven't looked at pace figures and barely looked at the raw times? Was it fast early for you to say that he actually ran pretty well? I mean, my own read was a little bit more cynical, thinking he got the trip that he needed and went away a little tamely for my taste.
Yes, it was. I mean, I've not seen pace figures. I'm going to guess the way they came home and the half being in 47-1. The other routes didn't go anywhere near that fast. We'll probably get time from US numbers, I would guess tomorrow or Wednesday, and we'll see it spell out. But I'm going to guess, just in terms of race flow and the raw numbers, that it was quick.
Okay.
So, you're looking at a race where, you know, the half mile position of the 1, 2, 3, 4 finishers was 8th, 11th, 10th, and 6th. So it was and then the 6th place horse, who Napoleon Solo edged for 5th, was 9th early. So, I mean, this was a race where the pace setters dramatically fell apart, and
he was best to speed.
Yeah,
he was
really
best.
Exactly. Right.
Even with the 5th. So maybe I'm being a little too harsh there. Butane, I feel like we were right to pretty much dismiss coming in. Do I have to give up on courting? Is it time to sign those papers?
Yeah, he's a horse that we need to give up on. No excuse here. Just a lumbering oaf of a horse that can't seem to get his act together. What was the joke that Steve Christ always told about? I think it was about his wife. Would love to go see Shug McGahee's horses and said, I want to see the big, pretty, slow ones. Exactly what courting is. So he is big, pretty, and slow. Baffert's Derby trail, and we'll talk a little bit more about Patente when we cover the Santa Anita Derby. It's getting a little desperate for Bob. He's tried horses in spots that I've been surprised by, but you know what? Just because you get a bunch of great horse flesh each year doesn't mean you're destined to be in the Derby. And Butane is a horse that now needs a drop in class and maybe even a little time off.
Yeah, doesn't sound wrong at all. Let's move over to Keeneland, where we had the chance to see a very different kind of performance in the Triple Crown prep race there. The Bluegrass Stakes, further ado, breaking the clock with a 106 and just blowing a field away. I like the horse in the race. I didn't see this coming. Did you?
No, it's hard to envision an 11-length win in a major Derby prep. If you were going to tell me on Friday night, hey, somebody's going to win by 11 lengths tomorrow, I would have made a line that further ado was about 1 to 5 to do that. Yeah, other than maybe somebody just freaking in the Santa Anita Derby, but they look too comparable form-wise. I think the key to this race in terms of him winning by a blowout margin is not only was he better than everybody, but Reagan's Honor was a complete no-show, and looks like a horse that, you know, I don't know if anything really went wrong, but he might need Lasix. Yeah. And he also probably needs to be on the lead. So a lot of times they'll start experimenting with these horses and change their tactics, and it's just not a great approach. And I think that's exactly the case with him. So this was good. This was really good. I mean, this is a horse that obviously had a huge win at Keeneland last year. And I think there's a couple of different things to analyze here, Pete. Number one, this is a quality horse, right? This is a horse that had shown himself to have real ability last year as a 2-year-old. I think I want to use the right term. I think the easy way out is to label him a Keeneland horse for course. He is a good horse that so far has run his 2 best races by far at Keeneland. I don't believe that means he cannot duplicate that form elsewhere. And I think to believe that is to shortchange him a little bit. I've also seen and heard the word bounce a lot over the last day or so. Horses like Further Ado don't really bounce. They just underperform relative to that type of effort. Now, you might argue that that is semantics. Bounces, for most people, happen when horses benefit from extreme circumstances that are not replicated in their next start. That's not going to happen with him because he has a style that's versatile. He is not Sinister Minister. Did Sinister Minister bounce in the Derby? Right. No, he just overperformed with a great scenario in the Bluegrass. I think this horse is very dangerous. I think that, I'll tell you this, if there wasn't the fanfare for him and the overwhelming public support for Renegade, I'd make Further Ado the favorite.
Interesting. Well, funny enough, this is a conversation that's particularly relevant with the breaking news. It's not breaking anymore, but the breaking news from last week that you will be making the Kentucky Derby and all the Churchill morning lines. Congrats on the new gig, because we all know you don't work hard enough.
Thank you. Yeah, very excited about it. I actually did an interview with the Louisville Courier-Journal earlier today talking about it, and he asked me what my first Derby memory was, and it was actually a great question. And it was watching the 91 Derby with my dad when Strike the Gold won and seeing Nick Zito win and, thinking to myself, if this guy is that excited, then this is something I want to do. So it's exciting. And I'm glad it actually – I had a couple people say to me Friday, it's an easy Derby. We know the favorite a month out. And I'm thinking to myself, wait until tomorrow, right?
Yeah, well, that's not
watching Further Ado come down the stretch and was like, oh, Further Ado just checked in and said, not so fast. So, yeah, it'll be fun. The Oaks actually will be really fun, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about that as well. But that's a super wide open race at this point. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you were telling me, hey, nobody knows anything about these horses, nobody knows who's going to be in the race, we're just going to look at it overnight, you're going to get PPs, you're going to make a line, I'd make Further Ado the favorite, understanding that his 2 Keeneland races are dramatic races that just overlay the rest of his form. I also saw people make comments about him swapping to his left lead. You know who swapped his left lead at the 16th pole of most of his starts at 3? Gunrunner.
Yeah.
Right. His sire. He did that all the time. He even did it into his 4-year-old season a couple of times. I don't really worry about that quite as much.
Not when the race is over, right? Isn't it a little bit different if it's a battle at that point? I might not like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, he'd earned the right to be a little goofy late, let's say it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And he's not a horse with what, you would consider to be like inefficient action, or he's not like a wobbly type who's, if Brant was doing it, I'd be worried. Right, because he doesn't move that smoothly in terms of the visual. But yeah, this was a command performance. It was great. For my own wagering, I'm glad Otinho got up for second, because I just played one exacta and played against Reagan's Honor basically, and he got second at 13-1, and I would imagine would go to the Derby now. I don't envision him having much of a chance, maybe a placing chance. He could be fourth just as a one-run type, but yeah, no doubt about it. The other thing I think, and you and I discussed this at some length on Friday, whenever we went over the race. The Tampa Derby was good, right? I think we now know that very clearly. It was a race where the speed figure probably should have been higher from the start. It shouldn't have been adjusted downward. It's unfortunate that Canaletto was injured, because I think those top 3 are all really solid. And, Brad Cox had 2 huge second off the layoff performances in the last few weeks, Life of Joy and Further Ado. So clearly we're learning a little bit more about Brad Cox as time goes by in terms of how he prepares his 3-year-old fillies and colts, that he's really going to get them cycling upward towards the Derby. And I mean, if we didn't see the best from Further Ado, then this is a horse with a lot of he could be something special.
They're all running for second, honestly. It'll be an interesting thing at the next Gunrunner family reunion with Otinho and Further Ado as well, with Otinho being the half to Gunrunner that he is. It's it just wow, what a sire, how he's
Gunrunner walks out like the Godfather, right? And it's like it's just incredible. I mean, he's been I was a big fan. Admittedly, I love Steve Asmussen. We're friendly, and I think he's an outstanding trainer. I think now it's great to see that he's obviously a guy who can train what is a future stallion. And Gunrunner was a very underappreciated horse from this century. I think a horse whose PPs you look back on and you realize, yeah, he was a lot better than I thought. And it was mainly because he got better when he got older.
Right.
That's huge. Being that it was the Nyquist Derby, we all kind of fell for Nyquist justifiably. He was an undefeated Derby winner, but Gunrunner was clearly the best horse in that crop.
Yeah, and I think that the shine of Arrogate around the same time also.
Well, I shouldn't say he was the best horse in the crop, right? Arrogate was the best horse in the crop.
Yeah.
It was actually a sneaky good crop. But yeah, he was very, very good.
All right. Before we move on, you've already addressed the sort of master of the obvious questions about Further Ado. You're going to hear people talking about bounce, which, like you, I believe the concept exists. I believe it is the most overused thing. The idea of reacting from an effort that does happen, but I mean, the Derby isn't for a month. It's April 6th. Like he should have enough time. But I guess what's going to happen is people are going to look at the PPs and they're going to see big race at Keeneland, 98 figure, and then they're going to see comparable distance, comparable amount of time later. Right? Was it 5 or 6 weeks? Comes back in the Kentucky Jockey Club, wins, but an uninspiring 82. But patterns aren't linear like this because the future is not predicated upon the past in such a specific way where I don't know. I mean, let that be the narrative and maybe he's a decent value second choice at 7-1 or something. Is that at all realistic? What price do you think this horse, to ask you to do your other job on the air for a second here, knowing you have loads of time to change your mind, what price is this horse going to be?
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be 6, 7, somewhere in there, 8-1 at most. I'm thinking, you're going to get the three of them at somewhere around 9-2, 6, and 8 as far as favoritism goes, because you got to work it out points wise. The other thing to factor in is that, I'm going to make some horses 50 and they might not even go off 50-1. Because nobody.
Right. Well, we know that phenomenon, right? Do you have to factor that phenomenon in? Not to go too far down this rabbit hole because it's a whole other show, but we've seen that the crowd doesn't let the long shots be long enough because it's the Derby and there's so much liquidity. I guess as a line maker, you kind of have to factor that in at this point, don't you?
You do. I also have embraced the reality that somebody is going to take way more money than I am going to anticipate. So pulling up last year's chart, you had 4 horses go off 40-1, go off over 40-1. They were Owen Almighty, East Avenue, Neo Equos, and Admired Daytona. What that meant is that you had sub 30-1 prices on horses like Flying Mohawk, Render Judgment, Cold Battle, Tistastic, Chunk of Gold. Then you had sub 20-1s, but high in the teens of Burnham Square, Final Gambit, and really those two were probably the highest too. So, you look back on some of those prices. Citizen Bull was a little under 14-1 in this race. Wow. He was, to me, more like 1,400-1. I think there was a little luster of Baffert being back in the race. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of chatter that week about, what if Citizen Bull gets loose and, things like that. So to answer your question, yes, there are going to be horses this year that receive way more support than they probably should. And I am going to have to try and capture that price wise ahead of time as best I can. And, one of them that I kind of feel like might be that is going back to the Wood, a horse like Right to Party. He was 38-1 in the Wood, but he's a McPeak horse. He's a closer. Right.
There's name that doesn't the name matter at this level. Yep. When we're talking about all the liquidity in the Derby, who's not going to want to bet on that horse? I mean,
they might trot out the Beastie Boys, and they're going to talk about right. I kid, but yeah, I mean. Sandman, Sandman was the ultimate hype horse, and he went off 5.77-1.
Whew. Wow, so short, especially relative chance. The Brits, well, not the bookmakers internationally are struggling right now, man. Renegade 4-1, Commandment 11-2, and Further Ado 5-1. So they've got them all in a really tight band. Yeah. We'll see how, as the narratives develop, how people can actually bet on those races. So as money comes in, what happens there? But I was thinking of it, if you just asked me in a vacuum, I would have thought Renegade, clear favorite, Further Ado, and then maybe Commandment getting a little lost. But that's not what's going on internationally at the moment. Anyway, we're going to talk so much more about the lines and that whole process. I think it's fascinating. But we did have another Derby prep race to talk about. Did not go the way that many were thinking. So Happy gets the win. Actually, the race came back faster than I would have just guessed watching it. It was 100 buyer speed figure for So Happy. Potente checking in second with a 95. What did you make of this race as a whole? And the same sort of question we've asked all along: how relevant is this race in terms of who's going to win the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, I mean, this was the quintessential, like, somebody please stand up race. You know, it was, we didn't have really any idea who was going to be good enough, who was going to get it done. And I'm glad it was So Happy. I thought he was a horse that kind of from the beginning looked like he had real ability. He ran a big race in the San Vicente earlier in the year. He's always trained like a good horse. The clockers had B plus and A minus workouts on him going back months. So yeah, it was a very solid effort. On paper, he does not look like a horse that would really want to go particularly far. He is a run happy. I'm sure Mattress Mac was somewhere smiling, even though he's promises me he's sworn off racing altogether. I think he can be convinced to bet his son of Run Happy in the Derby. So it was nice. You know, it was, look, you go through the field, Cherokee Nation broke slowly, didn't really factor into the decision. Probably a horse that needs Lasix now. We've seen it twice that he's run big races with Lasix, and now 5 times that he hasn't. Potente, I've seen already some of the discussion of, oh, well, he was on the lead and he really doesn't want to be there and he's going to be better with the target and so on and so forth. I know I fell for that with Litmus Test in the Arkansas Derby. I'm gonna bet on Bob Baffert horses being better on the lead. So I'm not buying it. I don't think that horse really is much. I think he's just, you know, he's a mid-pack type player. He'll get into the field. I don't envision he actually looms a candidate that's overbet. Robusta ran poorly after firing a big shot in the San Felipe. Not shocking. He's not really a top tier horse. And So Happy was the one that was in position to get the job done. He got a great trip, great ride from Mike Smith, stalking outside. I think this is a pretty embraceable horse by people in general. I think he's one that you could see get some money. I think he's got the name that will drive a lot of action as well. So yeah, I could see him taking real money in the Derby.
Yeah, you'll hear a lot of Potente narrative, I think, also just because he at least has a pleasing trajectory of right. figures. You know, if it was a weak Derby, I think these ones at the top of the market are too good for a horse like Potente to win.
I agree.
Probably too good for this to be a relevant prep. You know, I missed out on a very obvious podcast question that we have to go back to, looking at these horses at the top of the market. Where's Irad Ortiz going to land? Because that's going to affect your price massively.
Huge. And, you know, it's a fascinating question. I was talking about this with some friends over the weekend. And, you know, you think about it from Irad's perspective. I've never been an agent. You've never been an agent. We have mutual friends that are and that are very good at it. And I almost would wonder if you should ask John Paddock that question and see, you know,
what do you think Steve Rushing and Irad are going to do?
Right. And John's probably going to tell you, I hope that my phone rings from some of the guys that are, you know, because John's riders do ride regularly for Brad. So if you think about it, if you're Irad, you've got a long history with Todd Pletcher. But in the last 6 months, I would ask you this, because I know the numbers. How many winners do you think Irad has ridden for Brad, and how many has he ridden for Todd? Last 6 months.
I mean, just my gut is it would be comparable leaning Pletcher, right?
It's 36-10, Brad Cox.
What?
Yeah.
How's that possible?
Well, he rode everything first call in Kentucky, and he rode just about everything first call in Florida. And Todd's barn is not, you know, Todd has a lot of blue chip horses, but Todd's barn is not what it was 10 years ago in terms of what he's going to run in the winter. Brad put way more horses in Florida than he had before. And I kind of thought when I pulled the stats that it was going to be like that. It was actually way more significant than I realized. The other thing is that Johnny got back into Todd's barn a little bit over the winter when Irad had those decisions to make. Right. So if you're thinking about the future, if you're Irad, you're probably supposed to ride Further Ado. If you're thinking about the present and what some of the people around that horse mean to you, then you're probably supposed to ride Renegade. But it is a very unenviable position to be in. It's a great bad problem to have.
My hypothesis is, and we've talked about this before, that the Derby is so important to these guys in terms of legacy, whatever, that this jockey decision, he will put the politics aside and he will ride whoever he thinks has a better chance to win, because that's how important this race is. And that's why I think for me as a handicapper and for the market as a whole, this is going to tilt this decision would tilt the market one way or another under any circumstance. And there actually might be some signal in it this time around, and it might tilt it even more than it should. It's going to be fascinating. Have they given a timetable for making the decision?
They haven't. I mean, you would envision, I think the last time there was a big decision of this type to make was, gosh, I mean, I remember Garrett Gomez having to decide between Pioneer of the Nile and, why am I not remembering the horse he was deciding? It was a young, well, they were all young, but it was a fast, lightly raced horse. I don't remember a lot of big decisions like this. And what's also going on in the shadows is Flavien Prat has a decision to make as well, because he has to decide whether he's going to stick with emerging market or take one of the horses that, I mean, presumably he would take Commandment, provided that IRAD was going to go elsewhere. So I can tell you this: if he chooses Further Ado, it will almost certainly tilt Further Ado to favoritism to me.
Yeah, that makes.
I think it's between Further Ado and Renegade. I think given that he took off Commandment to ride Renegade, I think it's hard to go to Brad and say, by the way, we want to ride the horse we didn't actually ride in his final prep. I think there are some, and Jason from the Louisville Courier-Journal asked me who I thought potentially could ride the other horses. And I think here in McLaughlin's, 2 riders would be in great positions to get on potentially those 2 Brad Cox horses if IRAD went to Renegade, being John Velasquez and Luis Saez. I actually think Luis Saez could be a very good fit for Commandment, and Johnny's a really good fit for Further Ado. I mean, you want a horse that's stalking the pace on the outside. I don't know if you've got a better rider around than him. So, yeah.
The timetable is interesting because, I mean, from a jockey's point of view, you want to go as long as you can, because not to be negative, but we've seen so many high-profile Derby would-be favorites who then end up, getting sidelined between now and the first Saturday in May. The last thing you'd want would be for that, you pick one and that one's not running and you could have run the other one and da-da-da. But at the same time, from a horseman, from an owner point of view, they're going to want those decisions sooner rather than later.
I'm going to guess that the trainers are probably going to make it clear we need to know by around the 18th, because I would assume that a lot of them would want the Derby rider to be on for that penultimate workout, which is usually when they put in the most strenuous activity. Obviously, both of Brad's horses are in Kentucky now. Further Ado was in Kentucky already. I should say they're both at Churchill. So Brad is opting to. A lot of times guys that have had horses in Florida in the winter have left them in Florida right up until just about final work time, whereas Brad Cox has already taken Commandment to Churchill Downs. So my guess would be we're going to know by the 17th, 18th of April.
Stay tuned. Maybe that's an emergency podcast just for fun, because it'll do really well on YouTube too. Other sub 10-1 horses in that 09 Derby, besides Pioneer of the Nile. This is bothering me, so I want to figure it out. Papa Clem? Could it have been Papa Clem?
No, because he was, and maybe it was oh, you know what? It
Dunkirk was in there as it was near favorite.
He was looking at Lucky.
Was that the same year? Now I'm confused. I'm going to make you look it up because now it's really going to bother me.
It was Dunkirk. He was having Dunkirk and Pioneer of the Nile, right?
Interestingly, Dunkirk was bet more than Pioneer of the Nile, which was yeah. So that in that case, it didn't affect the narrative. But it's a different world now. We have these conversations much more like out in the open. It will become a narrative. This is going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. Anything else? We got a minute left. If we need it, Nick. Anything else I forgot to ask you about these 3 Derby preps?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they all had their own individual interesting performances coming out of them, more so the Bluegrass and the Santa Anita Derby. But it's, I think it took a little longer than it did last year because we saw that big journalism performance in the San Felipe, but it took a little bit longer, but we got some really solid final prep performances from horses. And I think it would suffice to say this is shaping up as a really, really, they're all great derbies, right? They all have elements that are great and they're all a lot of fun, but this one now is really, it's really coming together.
We'll leave it there. I'll thank you one more time, Nick. I'll remind people that the Kentucky Derby betting challenge now, we're really on the precipice of that. Go to twinspires.com, click on the tournaments tab. You can see all the opportunities to qualify for that. Who else will I thank? I will thank our founding partners at 10 Strike Racing. I'm going to thank our charity partners at Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga. Learn more about the work they do helping humans and horses in themoneypodcast.com/horses to get more info on them. I want to thank everybody for listening, for watching on the YouTube side. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.